You're here, not as a memory, not as a relic, but as someone who still carries meaning. You sit on a park bench, not to pass time, but to witness what others rush past. You watch, not out of curiosity, but because you've learned that watching means understanding. And understanding is something today's world often forgets. You're a man who knows how to listen to silence, how to draw meaning from rustling leaves, distant laughter, passing footsteps. Not because you've grown old, but because you've lived. You're a man who knows every moment has layers, every memory has weight, every decision has a cost. And no one taught you that. You learned it yourself, through experience, through failure, through patience. You were once the pillar of your home. Now, you're the pillar of a memory society no longer recalls, but you're still here, with a mind full of solutions no algorithm can replicate, with a heart that still knows how to forgive without needing thanks. You're a man who knows how to lose without losing yourself, how to be alone without becoming lonely. And that is your art. Not weakness, but wisdom carved by years. You're a man who still knows how to listen, and these days, listening is rarer than speaking. You're a man who still knows how to look, not to judge, but to understand. And that's something the younger generation needs to learn. Not in a classroom, not from a book, but by sitting beside you and asking, how did you live? You're a man who's still alive, not just with breath, but with meaning. And that meaning deserves to be heard. Not out of pity, but out of respect, out of understanding, out of the need to learn. You're here, and that alone makes your story worth hearing. This is what we explore on The Silent House, a space where the voices of experience are not just remembered, but honored. If this resonates with you, support us by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Let's make silence heard. You knew how to find your way without a map, how to answer questions without Google, how to manage life without an app. Not because you had no choice, but because you knew how. You're a man who understands how to speak to people, not with emojis, not with short texts, but with eye contact, tone, and silence. You're a man who knows how to keep a relationship alive, not through notifications, but through presence. But the world around you has changed. Speed has replaced depth. Information has replaced experience. And you, with all your knowledge, have been set aside. Not because you're wrong, but because no one asks. But the world around you has changed. Speed has replaced depth. Information has replaced experience. And you, with all your knowledge, have been set aside. Not because you're wrong, but because no one asks. You're a man who knows how to fix an engine without a manual, how to resolve conflict without shouting, how to raise a child without threats. But now, no one wants to learn. You're a man who knows how to forgive without shrinking yourself, how to be patient without being forgotten, how to keep going without being seen. And these are skills the modern world still lacks. You're a man who knows what failure means, not just in work, but in life, in love, in hope. And through those failures, you were shaped. You're a man who knows how to live with memory, not to escape, but to understand. And that's something we've lost. You're a man who still knows how to decide, not based on trends, but on experience. And that experience still matters, even if no one asks. You're a man who knows how to live, not with speed, but with depth. And that depth still holds value, even if it goes unseen. You're a man who can still teach, not with lectures, but with presence. And your presence still carries meaning, not for pity, but for understanding, for respect, for learning. You're here with experiences that may no longer be used, but can still build lives. You're not just an old man. That word is far too small for you. You're a man who once loved fully, not through short messages, but through presence, patience, and building. You're a man who once fought, not just in battle, but in your home, your work, your relationships. You're a man who once created, not just buildings, but families, trust, and meaning. And now, all of that is reduced to one word, old. But you're still the same lover, the same fighter, the same builder, only no one sees it. You're a man whose identity was shaped over decades, not by followers, not by trends, but by choices, mistakes, and resilience. You're a man who knows how to be himself without needing approval. And that's something today's generation hasn't yet learned. You're a man who understands what identity truly means, a collection of memories, experiences, beliefs, and scars. And that identity is still alive, even if no one asks. You're a man who knows how to define himself, not with a bio, but with being. You're a man who knows how to give meaning, not through slogans, but through action. And that meaning can still guide others. You're a man who knows how to lose himself and find himself again, how to forgive and trust again, how to stay even when everyone else leaves. And that is real identity, not something that's seen, but something that's felt. You're a man who can still inspire, not with words, but with presence. And your presence still matters, not for pity, but for understanding, for respect, for learning. You're here, with an identity that may be buried, but still exists, still carries meaning, still deserves to be seen. If someone is willing, if someone knows how to look, and we must learn how to look, not for you, but for ourselves, because you are a mirror of what we could become, if we learn how to live, not just how to be seen. This is The Silent House, a channel dedicated to honoring the voices, identities, and experiences that society too often